Taxi drivers, what's the deepest secrets you've overheard in your car? Before we start with the first story, please hit a subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. I was offered money by a drunk, lonely, and rich client to sit and talk with him at his villa. He paid for a fare and we just basically chilled in his mega house. 150 euros, 50 euro tip. Story 2. When my dad was driving a taxi in the 80s, he said he picked up meatloaf with a giant stuffed alligator at a bar. While stopped at a light, meatloaf offered him cocaine from a hidden pouch in the alligator that was also stuffed with more cocaine and cash. Story 3. An 18-year-old lad, regular customer, was stressing over his exam results and told me seriously if he'd failed that his life was over and he would commit suicide. He was completely serious. Apparently, his parents had been putting string pressure on him. I brought him home and called his father out of the house. By this time, the poor lad was in tears. I said to him that he should tell his dad what he told me. By this time, the father was distraught. I let them both talk for a bit right there, and then the father got him out of the car and brought him inside. The update was that he told his parents the whole story. They were horrified and got him into therapy. I've no idea whether he passed the exams or not, but I do know he was all right afterwards. I was very shook up about it. The situation could easily have gone wrong, and I take no credit at all. Story 4. I carried 2 medical professionals once, and one of them talked to his colleague about that time he was kindly kidnapped out of the hospital by 2 guys that took him to a mansion outside the city and asked to examine the heart condition of a man who seemed to be a local mafia boss that was wanted from the law. They somehow provided him with all the tools and help and made him operate the boss. They finally let him go and paid him with a big sum of cash, saying they would contact him again for anything else. He said it was of the scariest yet most interesting experiences in his life. And people who work in hospitals apparently have some mad orgies off duty. Story 5. I've worked for Uber, and once a passenger, a clearly intoxicated lady, told me she should have married her brother-in-law, cause her husband had a tiny dick and was much less handsome. But because the husband was also far richer, she married him. I hope she doesn't remember she told me that. She's probably mortified to this day if she does. Story 6. My uncle was a cab driver in Louisiana. One day he picks up 2 guys who then discuss a murder they are going to commit. After a while, they begin discussing whether they should also kill the cab driver because he heard them talking about the plan and could identify them. They eventually decided not to, but that was the day my uncle decided to stop being a cab driver. Story 7. Uber driver. I pick a dude up from a strip club, a well-known local celebrity. His drop-off is an affluent neighborhood in the foothills. As I pull into the driveway, a half-naked, middle-aged woman in lingerie is standing by the garage. He says, "This is close enough," so I stop about 20 yards from the woman. She cracks a whip and points to the ground at her feet. This dude gets out and on hands and knees in his Armani suit starts crawling toward her. She cracks the whip again and points at me. "You're next." Story 8. That he was cheating on his wife with his cocaine dealer, who came from the same country as I did, which is how the conversation got started, and it had been going on for 25 years. I don't know what impresses me more, a 25-year affair or a 25-year cocaine habit. Edit. To clarify, since a lot of you are speculating, the dealer was a woman. Quite good in bed too, from his detailed description. It was my first fare of the night, the first time working there as a California driver. I was helping out a friend of my dad's who owned a bar deep in Ontario, CA, by driving his regulars home. Fun times, lot of fights, incredible amounts of shenanigans between the patrons, and incredibly loud corridos blasting from the speakers all throughout the night. Story 9. Driving a fare to the airport. Hit a large piece of black ice. Cab skidded, hit a guardrail. Careened off another car that had flipped. White-knuckled the shit out of it. Skidded safely into the berm. Called my buddy to come get me. Took the fare to the airport. While we were going to the airport, the fare asked me why I was driving a cab. I told him I was saving up for a car. I was 22 and broke. Handed me his card and told me to call him tomorrow. I did. Fare was fleet manager for Hertz. Sold me a used rental car for peanuts. Side note, my son drives it while at college. Thank you, Mr. Vance. Story 10. Disabled person, so get a lot of taxis. Some regulars into work. Got close. One driver told me to keep secret that he was dying with cancer, kept blacking out with the pain and meds, and half convinced he should get it over with and swerve into oncoming TAR. Affik. He was very erratic in his driving and looked pretty ill. Nice guy though, so didn't snitch, and he regularly drove. Me. I was young, and therefore I... Story 11. Used to Uber on the side, here in Ottawa. Honestly, one could surveil both business and government here while driving an Uber if they wanted to. You could run 3 drivers and get intelligence about just a ton of things happening night and day. I definitely heard a ton of things, but the one that got me was about businesses closing and firing every one of its 200 employees months before it happened. It sucked for me when that one hit the news. I was there when they made the decision. Sweet things happened too. A woman had a fun dinner with her best friend and got in the passenger side first and said to me, "Watch this. I just found out I'm pregnant today, going home to tell my husband, but she's going to be the first to know." After me. Oh my God. That's right. You're the first I've told. I'm totally freaking out right now. It's cool. No big deal. Anyway, 5 minutes later, they're joking about it with me and she asks me my name. I tell her and she's like it was between that and Andrew for the middle name. This is a sign. It has to be my name. What if it's a girl? She'll be a badass with a male middle name like Michael Burnham. Coolest, sweetest conversation of my life. Story 12. I used to drive for Uber for about a year. Never had any crazy secrets. The craziest ride I had was after this kid who in his late teens and needed a ride on Thanksgiving evening after he got beat up by his dad and brother. His dad came out of the house and stood in front of the car. I backed out of there with the kid and took him an hour and a half away from there to his GF's house. I felt bad for the kid. Apparently he was trying to reconnect with his estranged family and it apparently didn't work out. I'm just glad I could get him to a safe place. Other than that, the main things I dealt with were a lot of drunk people leaving bars. I worked a late shift on weekends when people were out partying. I saw so many bachelor and bachelorette parties. I would get offers to come smoke weed, do lines, go watch strippers at bachelor parties, offers of booze, flirting, etc. Never took up any of those offers as I was out there in a professional setting to make money. I did enjoy hearing about people's lives and talking to them for a while, and it made me feel good that I could provide a safe ride for people and help to keep some drunk drivers off the road. Story 13. There was a lady I picked up at like 4 a.m., and she was obviously desperately seeking something. The trip was over an hour and a half away, and I could tell she was hurting physically, sniffles and cringing that were synonymous with opioid withdrawals. She was quiet the first 45 minutes, but texting often. A phone call occurred where she was arguing with someone who didn't want her to go to this destination. She kept saying she would be fine. I asked out of concern if she was okay, and she spilled the beans. The call was from her girlfriend, who didn't want her to go to this house in a fancy area to meet up with some dudes who wanted her to come over to hang out in exchange for pills. Her GF was convinced she was going to be raped. I told her that I'd been in a similar situation with pills when I was younger, and that cannabis helped and that in a few more days she would be free of the whole thing. She cried and cried. I had an old cannabis vape deep in my car that I donated to the cause. It worked, and she chilled out and let her know if she canceled I would return her to her pickup location, since I had to go back to that area anyway. She canceled the trip. She slept the whole way back. I hope she made it out of that addiction. Less than 3, those places really feel hopeless when you don't know how to get out. Story 14. Former Uber driver. Picked up a very well-dressed lady from one side of town heading to a very rich neighborhood on the other side of town. During the ride, she made a series of calls and it became clear she was a call girl with quite a few customers. It also became clear I was delivering her to her biggest client, an accident and injury attorney known for extremely extensive advertising in my local area. Anybody around here would know his name, and he was supposed to be married and the whole family man type. Well, my passenger indicated otherwise. His house was a very nice mansion. Law must pay well. Story 15. I worked incident support for a kinda shouldn't name ride company that rhymes with Schuber. It tended to be either rider complaining a driver did X to them or a driver complaining a rider threw up in their car, etc. This one dude called incident support to tell us that following picking up a fare, a dude with 2 huge duffel bags in the boot, his car was written off and therefore couldn't work with aforementioned car. Turned out the dude had gotten a ride at 2 a.m., put the duffel bags in the trunk, told the driver he'd done something he really regretted but couldn't go back on. Took the ride to an underpass with a river and threw the duffel bags into the river. Driver called the police first, mostly to tell them a dude was being weird as hell. After a brief search of the river for the bags, the police found Ryder's murdered cut-up girlfriend in the bags. The smell was so bad in the car that the cleaning crew couldn't remove the smell or stains after the police forensics exam. The insurance company wrote off the car. To answer a common reaction, I'm afraid I can't give you the direct article because it's still an active case both for company and the police. I'd lose my job and mama need that pay. My office handles 2 countries, one's a direct safety line, the other is incident response. If you're in sleuth and read my comments, you can probably work out what country. The second reaction was how stupid was this dude. As far as I know, he didn't even think about getting a ride to the bridge or complaining along the way. The driver doesn't think he thought at all about the consequences of doing so. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like more of this, please hit a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below. I'll see you in the next video.